Welcome to the Wine Show. Okay. A red from Mike. Mike.
All right. Red wine. Speaking of Italy, although we were drinking a wine from Napa, we're going to talk about Sangiovese. Producer here, Montevertine, an old school, traditional style producer from the region Chianti within the broader Tuscany. I think really just making these sorts of unadulterated Sangiovese wines. As a student of politics and someone who loves wine,
Really?
Italy, yeah, well, poli sci, yeah. Italy is like the culmination of my worlds, because I think it's just where politics and wine mesh in the most interesting and hilarious way.
I would say more of wine and stories.
Wine and stories. That's your.
Well, that's what I call the Italian politics. Just a big story
Right, big story.
and a good story.
But I mean, politics
Sorry,
definitely. Oh, it's all right.
All right.
Politics definitely enter wine here. In Tuscany, we have the lovely DOC, or in Italy as a whole, we have the lovely DOC system. Classifies wine, and there was a time many years ago when they decided, Sangiovese is the grape of Tuscany, but in an attempt to make Chianti and wines from Tuscany more marketable to the international palate, particularly the United States, they started pushing winemakers to include more.
Can I say something about that really quick?
Yes.
So when he says wine styling after the international palate, let me give you an idea what that means. America's become the biggest consumer of wine. If you're anywhere in Europe, one of your biggest markets is going to be the U.S., right? So what winemakers sort of do is make wines that they felt would really be pleasing to the American palate. American palate really likes bigger fruit, likes more forward wines. We really don't like subtlety. We really don't like acidity. That's really generality, but that's typically what we find in California. Winemakers in Europe started to try to really make wines that emulated that. Sorry.
Additionally, we like names we know, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah. It was actually ruled that you couldn't make a DOC wine with the Chianti label that was 100% Sangiovese. And our winemaker here, Sergio Manetti, decided that he was going to just back out of the DOC system. He's a proponent of the beauty that Sangiovese is capable of, and when you really throw in these big, masculine, juicy, plump, lush grapes, it masks the finesse, the sort of balance of power and finesse. When I think of Sangiovese, I really think that those two things come together in the most beautiful way possible. But anyway, Sergio Manetti's acquired this little hillside hamlet back in 1967. He was actually formerly of the steel industry, and bought the land so that he could.
You're a very hard-edged man.
Hard-edged man, yes.
Steel.
Bought the land so that he could keep all of his horses on it. There were some vines on the hillside, and he actually made his first vintage. So he decided he would use the vines, the Sangiovese vines that were here in 1971. Went to Vin Italy, this massive wine festival that's really like a rite of passage for winemakers and wine nerds around the world to go and visit this annual festival in Italy, and sort of it redefined what his passion was, and he's decided that wine was his passion instead of steel, being a hard-edged man. So, a decade or so later is when they declared that you couldn't do 100% Sangiovese. He backed out of the DOC game, if you will, the politics involved with it, and went to the sort of Vin di Tavola, and later the IGT, which came around. But he's still, now you can do 100% Sangiovese, he still just doesn't play the game, and this is sort of, you'll see with a lot of Italian producers sort of going rogue and standing up to the system, but a really hands-off producer, organic and biodynamic, but he doesn't get the certification. He does use compost and fertilizer, which is made on the grounds. After rains, where there's the threat of mold and bugs coming in and ruining the fruit, he sprays the vines with a tincture made from herbs that he grows on site. Uses natural gravity racking systems, which may sound a little bit modern, but I mean, super hands-off guy. Ferments in concrete with a glass lining, and then ages in large bottings, these huge oak barrels, so it doesn't impart a lot of that vanilla and chocolate and flavors, which have really sort of, I mean, Chianti has just become, Sangiovese has become so masked, whether it be by these Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, these other big varietals, or the use of oak. So what we're left with, this is the 2009 Montevertine. It's what I said about Sangiovese earlier. It's just like this fusion of finesse and power. 5% Canaiolo and Colorino, both native grapes to the Tuscany region in here as well, but predominantly Sangiovese. Dried red fruit, cherry, sour tart cherry, little bit of this subtle brown spice thing, like cinnamon, possibly from the oak, maybe a little bit just from the grapes. But just like, this is versatile, especially with our menu. I think you can start. It's got the acidity, so you can do like nice charcuterie items, prosciutto, the duck rillettes, cut through that fat, pork, and then I think it's got the tannins to stand up to a fillet or New York.
Sure. Let me give you two classic pairings that we find in Tuscany, and just to go with the if it grows with it, it goes with it thought. If you look at pasta-based dishes, the sauces in Tuscany, we see a lot of tomatoes. Sangiovese, a fantastic red wine with tomatoes. There's some inherent balance between these two things that work really well. So anything that's got a tomato base on it, like tomatoes in the dish, Sangiovese is a great go-to. Another thing that you'll find quite frequently, or very famous actually in Tuscany, is this bistecca di Fiorentine, excuse me, which is a huge T-bone. We're talking 5 pounds T-bone. And typically what they do is they grill it upright with the bone like vertical like this, right? And you know when to flip the steak is when you start to see the marrow start to boil out of the top of the bone, and you flip it down and you just do quickly on both sides. Boom, your steak is done. Boom. Sangiovese inherently has got big tannin and structure to it. Sometimes when people like me who don't really blind taste that well and just make a lot of stuff up, sometimes I think this is Nebbiolo. I can see through it like I can with Nebbiolo, and that tannin structure. Just like Nebbiolo. Tannin, remember, protein, great. Boom. Yeah, classic wine though. I love this thing. I mean, just like, I could keep going back and smelling this thing. It almost smells me, because there's a little bit of leather component. It almost smells like the inside of an old vintage Alfa Romeo. I don't know why. There's a little bit of someone like smoked a pipe in it. Very classic.
The car?
Yeah, they smoked a pipe in the car. I used to have a friend. I used to steal his dad's BMW M5. He smoked a pipe in the thing. It smelled just like this kind of.
I love the smell of tobacco pipe.
Anyway, so I think it's a beautifully classic wine. Very small production. This wine, like I said, comes in and out for us all the time. It's great. Enjoy it while you can.
Boom.
Thank you. Be well.